The Bible is full of enigmatic passages that are often left out of typical Sunday readings. One of them, seldom preached from the pulpit, is Psalm 82, where God speaks to an assembly of gods and warns them that they will die like humans. These texts raise profound questions. Who are those gods who can die? What did they do to merit such a fate? How does this idea connect with the Watchers of Enoch, with the Titans of Greek mythology, or with the exiled gods of Mesopotamia? This script explores these questions in a narrative and speculative way, following the line of earlier scripts that interpret biblical passages and link them to other traditions and modern theories. Chapter 1. You are gods, yet you will die like men. In Psalm 82, Yahweh sits in the celestial council and pronounces a judgment against certain figures called elohim, gods. The text declares, "I said, you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. Yet like humans you will die and fall like any of the princes." This phrase puzzles many modern readers. Does the Bible admit the existence of other deities? Why would they be punished to die as simple mortals? Traditional interpretations vary. Some theologians contend that the gods are merely human judges, corrupt in their administration, whom God calls Elohim sarcastically because they exercise divine authority. A pastoral commentary notes that the passage describes a court in which God judges unjust rulers. Their crime was not defending the weak and oppressing the poor. Therefore, God will strip them of their offices and of their lives. This approach emphasizes social responsibility and concludes that dying like men refers to the removal and death of unjust leaders. However, other scholars, such as the biblical expert Michael Heiser, argue that the text refers to heavenly beings. In his essay on the plural Elohim, Heiser reminds readers that the word does not always designate the supreme God, but can refer to any spiritual being. He notes that in the Old Testament context, the Israelites conceived a divine council in which Yahweh assigned to the sons of God responsibility over the nations. Deuteronomy 32, 8-9. These celestial princes failed in their mission, were unjust, and God judges them. The point of Psalm 82:6 is that, in response to the corruption of the Elohim, they will be stripped of their immortality and die as humans die. Heiser interprets these gods not as mortal judges, but as real beings of the spiritual order, degraded because of their wickedness. The punishment, in his reading, implies the loss of immortality. Those gods will be treated like men. This perspective may seem shocking, but the text itself suggests a heavenly council scenario. The psalmist evokes God standing in the assembly of God, judging other Elohim. The language is similar to other references to the divine council where Yahweh is surrounded by other celestial beings. For example, 1 Kings 22:19-23. If we accept this view, Psalm 82 describes a rebellion within the spiritual world. Gods who should rule the nations with justice are corrupt and will be punished with death. Chapter 2. Angels who abandoned their domain. The letter of Jude, in the New Testament, brings another enigma. Verse 6 states, "And the angels who did not keep their dignity, but abandoned their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day." This brief sentence alludes to a group of angels who deserted their post and were imprisoned. Commentator Grant Osborne explains that Jude uses this example to warn apostates. He notes that the text evokes the account in Genesis 6, where the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took wives, giving rise to the Nephilim. Osborne writes that these angels did not keep their lofty position in heaven and gave themselves over to a sexual sin with human women. Therefore, they were reserved in chains for judgment. Other commentators, such as Barnes, underline that the sin was pride and rebellion. The angels attempted to elevate themselves to a position higher than God had assigned and were confined in eternal darkness. When did this angelic fall occur? An ancient tradition connects the verse with the Watchers in the Book of Enoch. In that work, written around the 2nd century BC, it is told that 200 angels, called Watchers, descended in the days of Jared, took human wives, sired giants, and taught humanity forbidden arts, such as metallurgy, astrology, and magic. God ordered the archangel Uriel and his companions to chain them in the abyss until the final judgment. A modern synthesis of the text of Enoch explains, "The Watchers conspired to marry human women, taught humans many forbidden skills. God condemned them and confined them in Tartarus until their judgment." The article details that Azazel, one of the leaders, taught the making of weapons and cosmetics, while others taught astrology, sciences, and sorcery. The consequence was a humanity corrupted and violent, which provoked the flood. Although the Book of Enoch is not part of the biblical canon, several New Testament writers knew it. Jude 6 and 2 Peter 2:4 allude to angels confined until the day of judgment, and church fathers like Irenaeus and Tertullian saw in Enoch the origin of that tradition. Historian Eben de Jager explains that God ordered the archangels to bind the Watchers and cast them into Tartarus, so that they would remain there until their final judgment. This punishment complements the idea of Psalm 82. Divine beings who corrupt their mission will be demoted or imprisoned. Chapter 3. The Heavenly Court and the Judgment of the Gods. A common element among the texts is the existence of a divine council. In Psalm 82, Yahweh appears as supreme judge in a heavenly court. The Elohim are accused of injustice, abuse of power, and negligence toward the poor. In response, God strips them of their immortality and reduces them to human status. This scene resembles mythologies in which the gods gather in assemblies, such as the Council of the Olympian Gods in Greek literature, or the courts of the Anunnaki in Mesopotamia. Jude 6, for its part, does not describe a court, but presents a celestial hierarchy with angels who have their own domain or principality. Their sin was abandoning their position, perhaps out of lust or pride. The consequence was to be chained under darkness. In the tradition of Enoch, those angels are judged and sentenced by archangels. The archangel Raphael binds Azazel and hurls him into a dark desert, while Michael, Gabriel, and Sariel punish the others. This narrative exposes a cosmic order in which transgressing the norms brings a proportional punishment. The idea of a celestial council appears also in Deuteronomy 32:8-9, where God apportions the nations among the sons of God according to the number of the children of Israel. The Qumran texts suggest that each nation had a spiritual prince who governed it. If these princes became corrupt, Psalm 82 would declare their sentence. St. Paul resumes this concept when he speaks of powers, principalities, and authorities in the heavenly realms, and affirms that Christ disarmed the spiritual powers. Thus, the Bible hints at the existence of powerful beings operating behind human structures. Chapter 4. Parallels in Greek mythology. The image of gods who are judged and imprisoned is not exclusive to the Hebrew tradition. In Greek mythology, the Titanomachy narrates the war between the Olympian gods led by Zeus and the older generation of Titans, headed by Kronos. After the victory of the Olympians, the Titans were thrown into Tartarus, the deepest region of the underworld, not only in Hades, but in Tartarus, the lowest region of the universe used as a place for monsters and banished gods. Hesiod describes Tartarus as a gloomy abyss, as far beneath the earth as the sky is above the earth. The Titans were entombed there as punishment for their rebellion. This myth bears similarities to the punishment of the Watchers, who were cast into Tartarus in the account of Enoch. Likewise, several heroes and impious kings were condemned to eternal tortures in Tartarus. Sisyphus, condemned to push a rock eternally; Tantalus, subject to perpetual hunger and thirst; Ixion, bound to a fiery wheel. The idea that even semi-divine beings or kings descend to the underworld for their crimes reflects a principle of cosmic justice comparable to the divine judgment of Psalm 82. In Greek mythology, lesser gods and titans are not immortal in the absolute sense. They can be mutilated, imprisoned, or degraded. Kronos, father of Zeus, is dethroned and expelled. Prometheus is chained to a rock for stealing fire. Apollo kills the children of Niobe, and the giants die in the Gigantomachy. Although the Olympians seldom die, their power is limited by fate, the Moirai, and they can be punished. These narratives show that the death or fall of the gods is a recurring theme in human imagination. Superior beings are also subject to a transcendent order. Chapter 5. The Anunnaki and the Banished Gods of Mesopotamia. In ancient Mesopotamia, the word Anunnaki designated a group of gods born of heaven and earth. According to an article in Britannica, the functions and names of these gods varied, but they included deities like Enlil, Enki, Ninhursag, Sin, Shamash, and Ishtar. Over time, the Mesopotamians developed the idea that a group of ancient gods were deposed and banished to the underworld by a younger generation. The Hittites and Hurrians identified those ancient gods with the Anunnaki and invoked them as witnesses in treaties. This concept recalls the Titanomachy. A generation of rebellious deities is relegated to the depths, while the younger gods assume control. In the Sumerian myth Enlil and Ninlil, for example, the god Enlil is exiled to the underworld for violating Ninlil. In the descent of Inanna into the underworld, the goddess Inanna descends to her sister, Ereshkigal's realm, and the subterranean judges, the Anunnaki, judge her and kill her temporarily. These tales underscore the existence of a tribunal in the underworld and the possibility that the gods die or are demoted. Some modern theorists have linked the Anunnaki to the Watchers or to supposed extraterrestrials. The article on the Anunnaki observes that their meaning remains imprecise and they have been associated with various roles. Advocates of the ancient astronaut theory argue that stories of gods who descend and teach advanced knowledge are reminiscent of visits by extraterrestrials. The Wikipedia page on ancient astronauts summarizes how Genesis 6 and the Book of Enoch have been interpreted by these proponents. The Book of Enoch expands Genesis 6:1 by affirming that the sons of God were a group of 200 angels called Watchers, who taught humanity metallurgy, cosmetics, astrology, meteorology. God then ordered that the Watchers be imprisoned in the earth and created the Great Flood to get rid of the Nephilim. Some proponents suggest that these angels were extraterrestrials who disobeyed orders. Although this theory lacks academic support, it illustrates how contemporary imagination merges mythology and science fiction. Chapter 6. Mesoamerica. The gods who sacrificed themselves for the sun. In the Aztec world, the gods could also die. The myth of the 5 suns recounts that the world has passed through 5 eras, each governed by a different sun. In the 5th creation, the gods gathered in Teotihuacan and decided that someone had to sacrifice himself to become the new sun. A humble god threw himself into the fire and became the sun. However, the star remained motionless. For the sun to move, all the other gods had to sacrifice themselves. Only then did the sun begin to traverse the sky. This myth shows that the death of the gods can be a voluntary act of creation, and that the life of the cosmos depends on divine self-sacrifice. In some versions, the god Xolotl hid and was turned into an axolotl, symbolizing that even the gods can fear death. Furthermore, Mesoamerican cosmogony teaches that the earth was created from the body of the goddess Xiuhpochtli, torn apart by Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. Other gods, like Quetzalcoatl, descended to the underworld to rescue the bones of previous generations and, mixing them with his blood, created humanity. These stories unite divine death with the rebirth of the world, establishing a parallel with Ragnarök, where destruction gives way to a new cycle. Chapter 7. Ragnarök, the fate of the Norse gods. Norse mythology has its own vision of the end of the world and of the death of the gods. Ragnarök means fate of the gods, and is prophesied as a cataclysmic battle between the Aesir gods and the forces of chaos led by Loki. An article describes that Ragnarök will be the catastrophic event that will bring an end to the universe and most of its deities. This colossal conflict will destroy the world, but from its ashes, a new and improved version will emerge. The signs that precede it include the Fimbulvator, a never-ending winter, and the release of Fenrir and Jörmungandr. In the final battle, the wolf Fenrir devours Odin, the serpent Jörmungandr and Thor kill each other, and the giants destroy the World Tree. Finally, the sky collapses, the earth is consumed by flames, and only a few gods and humans survive to rebuild the world. The idea that the gods can die in Ragnarök reflects the Norse conception of a universe ruled by fate, Urudar. Not even the gods escape death. Their heroism is shown in that they face their end with courage. After the battle, the sons of Odin and Thor survive, as well as a man and a woman hidden in Yggdrasil, and together they repopulate the world. This cycle of death and rebirth resembles the Aztec vision of the 5 suns and suggests that myths from different cultures share the intuition that even supreme beings are subject to cosmic cycles. 8. Reflections on the mortality of the gods. Until now, we have seen that the Bible, the Book of Enoch, and various world mythologies narrate the fall or death of divine beings. What message do they intend to communicate? Below, we explore some interpretations and questions that can provoke debate among the audience. Cosmic justice. In Psalm 82, the gods are judged for their social injustice. They did not defend the poor, nor maintain moral order. God rebukes them and sentences them to die like men, This conveys the idea that immortality and power are conditioned by justice. Divinity is not an absolute privilege, it entails responsibility. Similarly, the Watchers of Enoch are punished for corrupting humanity, and the Titans are banished for defying the cosmic order. Justice reaches even the higher beings. Conditional immortality. For Heiser and others, the phrase, "you will die like men," implies the loss of immortality. In the Bible, only God is inherently immortal. The other celestial beings receive their life from God. If they rebel, they can be stripped of their longevity. This concept might explain why the serpent of Genesis is cursed to crawl and eventually be destroyed. It also connects with the Christian idea that believers will partake in the divine nature but can lose it. Cycles of death and rebirth. Greek, Mesopotamian, Mesoamerican, and Norse mythologies speak of cosmic cycles. The Titans are overthrown, but their imprisonment gives rise to a new era of gods. The Aztec gods die so that the sun may move. In Ragnarök, the death of the gods opens the way for a new creation. These stories suggest that the death of divinities is not the final end, but part of a process of renewal. Even the Bible speaks of a new heaven and a new earth. Revelation 21. Could the judgment of Psalm 82 be a prelude to a reorganization of the celestial order? Forbidden knowledge. The Watchers of Enoch taught men arts that supposedly accelerated their corruption. Metallurgy, magic, astrology. In the Mesopotamian narrative, Enki shares the knowledge of civilization with humanity. In some Greek myths, Prometheus steals fire from the gods and is punished. These stories can be interpreted as warnings about the irresponsible use of knowledge. Today, in the era of artificial intelligence and genetics, are there parallels? Is technological progress a divine gift, an act of rebellion, or both? Extraterrestrial hypotheses. Some proponents of the ancient astronaut theory see in Genesis 6 and Enoch the visit of beings from another planet. According to this theory, the sons of God were extraterrestrials who mixed their DNA with humans and transmitted advanced knowledge. Their transgression would have been to violate a directive of non-intervention, and the punishment, being imprisoned in the earth or losing their immortality, would resemble an exile. Although it lacks empirical evidence, this hypothesis raises interesting questions. Is it possible that myths preserve distorted memories of encounters with non-human beings? Why do so many cultures speak of gods who descend from the sky, mate with humans, and teach arts, then are punished? Gods as metaphors for kings. Another interpretation suggests that the gods who die represent deified kings. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs were considered living gods. Upon death, they joined Osiris. Mesopotamian rulers at times called themselves gods, and their downfalls could be narrated as the death of deities. The psalmist might be criticizing judges or rulers who believe themselves divine, reminding them that they will die like any man. In the modern era, we could apply the critique to leaders who consider themselves untouchable. Chapter 9, Case Study, Jesus and Psalm 82. The Gospel of John, 10:34-36, records a moment when Jesus cites Psalm 82 to defend himself against an accusation of blasphemy. The Jews were about to stone him because he called himself the Son of God. Jesus responds, "Is it not written in your law? I said, you are gods." If he called gods those to whom the word of God came, why do you say that I blaspheme because I said, I am the Son of God? In the pastoral commentary mentioned earlier, the preacher concludes that Jesus refers to mortals. That is, if Scripture can call gods the recipients of the word, how much more to the one sent by the Father? But if Psalm 82 refers to a divine council, Jesus' answer acquires another dimension. He is implying that he is the Son who presides over the gods. Heiser argues that Jesus does not refer to human judges, but to the Elohim of the council. By quoting the psalm, Jesus identifies himself with Yahweh who judges the gods. His interlocutors understood that he proclaimed himself equal to God. Jesus reinterprets Scripture to show that his divinity does not contradict the law. This perspective provokes a theological debate. Is Jesus affirming the existence of other divine beings? Or is he transforming a metaphor into a revelation about his identity? Chapter 10. The Watchers, Giant Heroes, and Pre-Diluvian Violence. The Bible mentions the Nephilim briefly, giants or mighty ones who inhabited the earth before the flood. The Book of Enoch offers more details. The Nephilim, children of the Watchers and human women, grew until they devoured what men produced and then became cannibals. The account of Enoch describes a world steeped in violence and corruption. The blood of humans cried out to heaven and the archangels intervened. Ultimately, God ordered the flood to eliminate the giants and purify the earth. Curiously, many ancient myths speak of a race of giants or hybrids that caused chaos. In Greek mythology, the giants born of Gaia rebelled against Zeus in the Gigantomachy and were defeated. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero Enkidu is a wild semi-divine being who fights Gilgamesh before becoming his friend. In the Popol Vuh of the Maya, the first men of wood are destroyed for being cruel. These stories could be echoes of an ancestral memory about superior beings who strayed from their purpose. Modern theories see in the Nephilim either lineages of kings, Canaanite tribes, or even descendants of extraterrestrials. The passage in Numbers 13, where the spies say that they saw giants in Canaan, might indicate that some communities survived the flood. Others suggest that the genes of the Nephilim persisted and manifest in narratives of giants in history. In any case, the story of the Nephilim adds tension to the theme of gods who die. Their existence was short and violent. Their destruction served as a warning. Chapter 11. Forbidden Technologies and Punishments. A distinctive feature of the Watchers is that they taught technology. Azazel taught the making of weapons and ornaments. Semjaza taught enchantments. Kokabel taught astrology. Barakijal taught the signs of lightning. Sariel taught the phases of the moon. Irenaeus and other church fathers interpreted these teachings as witchcraft and idolatry. For them, the unauthorized knowledge corrupted humanity and provoked divine intervention. This theme resonates with myths such as that of Prometheus, who stole divine fire to give it to humans and was chained on the Caucasus so that an eagle would devour his liver eternally. It also recalls the story of Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca, who killed the monster Chipactli to create the world and then brought the knowledge of agriculture and the calendar to humanity, generating both civilization and sacrifice. Even in modern narrative, the Tower of Babel can be read as a human attempt to reach heaven and be punished for it. In contemporary culture, the film 2001, A Space Odyssey shows a monolith that accelerates human evolution by teaching apes to use tools. In science fiction, the figure of the benevolent or malevolent alien who shares technology is deeply rooted. Our current world faces debates about disruptive technologies, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, nanotechnology, and their ethical consequences. Are we about to repeat the error of the Watchers? Is there a moral limit to knowledge? Chapter 12. Cultural and Political Context. Psalm 82 could be situated in the context of the Israelite monarchy and its relations with pagan nations. The nations were under the authority of deities such as Baal or Ashtoreth. The psalmist adopts the worldview of the environment to convey a message. Even if those deities were real, they are subject to the God of Israel. He judges them for their injustice and announces their death. The affirmation, "the gods are dead," would be a radical declaration of monotheism in a polytheistic world. James Luther Mays comments that the psalm proclaims that Yahweh's sovereignty implies the death of the gods. On the other hand, Jude writes in a context of crisis in the early church. False teachers were corrupting the believers. Jude resorts to examples from sacred history to warn them: Israel in the desert, the fallen angels, and Sodom. His mention of the angels who did not keep their dignity aims to show that even celestial beings can fall and be punished. In the Jewish culture of the Second Temple, the stories of Enoch circulated widely and gave vivid details of the rebellion of the Watchers. Jude uses this background to reinforce his teaching. Chapter 13. Alternative Hypothesis. Physical Gods. Beyond theological and mythological interpretations, there is the hypothesis that these gods were physical beings of flesh and bone, perhaps members of an advanced civilization. The ancient astronaut theory proposes that beings from another planet visited the Earth, were worshipped as gods, and transmitted knowledge. According to some proponents, the phrase, "you will die like men," could reflect that these beings, although superior, were mortal. The punishment of being thrown into Tartarus or the underworld would be a mythical way of describing their confinement in underground bases or their expulsion from the planet. This hypothesis is speculative and does not have strong academic support. However, it raises interesting questions about the universality of certain motives. Why do so many cultures speak of gods who descend from the sky, mate with humans, and teach arts? Could they be distorted memories of contacts with other civilizations, whether human or not? Or are they projections of universal yearnings and fears, such as the desire to transcend the human condition and the ambivalence toward power and knowledge? 14. Existential connections. The theme of the mortality of the gods touches deep philosophical sensibilities. In Western tradition, philosophers have reflected on the death of God as a metaphor for the crisis of meaning. Friedrich Nietzsche proclaimed that God is dead to express the collapse of metaphysical certainties in modernity. But in the myths analyzed here, the gods die literally. This could be interpreted as a warning against idolatry. Any power other than the absolute is destined to perish. Only the transcendent source remains. Likewise, the fact that gods and angels can fall underscores freedom and moral responsibility. The Watchers had free will and chose to violate the rules. The princes of the nations chose to oppress the weak. Their fall illustrates that greatness without virtue leads to ruin. This applies to humans and to nations. An empire that abuses its power will harvest destruction. On the other hand, the stories of gods who sacrifice themselves, as in the Aztec myth, show divine compassion. The sacrifice of the gods to make the sun move can be seen as a metaphor of the divinity giving itself for the good of creation. In Christianity, God himself becomes incarnate and dies for humans. The difference is that, in Christian faith, the death of God is a singular act that overcomes death. In the Aztec myth, the divine sacrifice must be repeated through human sacrifices. Chapter 15. Open debate. The audience that follows this type of video usually enjoys discussion and speculation. Below are some provocative questions that can serve as points of debate. Who are the gods of Psalm 82? Are they arrogant human judges, Canaanite deities, angelic princes, or visitors from another world? What evidence supports each option? Does the sentence, "You will die like men," imply the loss of immortality? Or does it simply refer to the death of kings? Can a spiritual being die? Does Jude 6 refer to Genesis 6 and the Watchers? What is the relationship between Jude, 2 Peter, the Book of Enoch, and the apocryphal traditions? Can the New Testament quote non-canonical traditions? Why do so many cultures have stories of gods who fall, die, or are banished? Is it a universal archetype? What do these myths tell us about human psychology and the structure of power? Should we fear forbidden knowledge? The Watchers taught arts that accelerated corruption. Prometheus stole fire. The serpent offered the fruit of knowledge. Is knowledge inherently dangerous, or does it depend on its use? How do we apply this reflection to our technological era? Are the ancient astronaut theories plausible? Is it reasonable to imagine beings from other worlds interacting with primitive humanity, or is it a modern projection onto ancient texts? What moral lesson can be drawn? Regardless of the literal or symbolic interpretation, what teachings does the fall of the gods leave us? Do they remind us of the fragility of power, the need for social justice, and the danger of arrogance? Throughout this script, we have traversed a broad panorama, from the mysterious council of Psalm 82 to the prison of the Watchers in Enoch, from the Titans imprisoned in Tartarus to the banished gods of Mesopotamia, from the divine sacrifices of the Aztecs to the final battle of Ragnarök. These stories, though diverse, share a common thread. Superior beings are not exempt from judgment. Justice, ethics, and the cosmic order demand responsibility even from those who seem divine. The death or fall of the gods is not mere morbid curiosity, but a reminder that no finite power is absolute. In addition, we have explored how these narratives relate to human history, technology, philosophy, and popular culture. The question, "Can a god die?" opens a range of reflections on morality, knowledge, authority, and destiny. In a world where the boundaries between science, religion, and myth blur, these themes continue to captivate the imagination. Finally, as narrator, I invite the viewer not to take these stories as dogmas, but as doorways to questioning. Ancient scriptures and mythologies do not exhaust themselves in unique interpretations. They are mirrors that reflect our contemporary concerns. By meditating on the gods who died, we may discover something about our own human condition, our search for transcendence, our fear of death, our longing for justice, and our desire to understand the order of the cosmos. Let each one draw their own conclusions and share their vision in the comment box.